A brunette, a redhead, and a blonde are trying to break out of the prison. It took them weeks to find a weak spot on the wall where they could climb over in the middle of the night. After waiting for a cloudy, moonless night, they are finally ready to escape. As the brunette climbs over the top of the wall, she makes a little bit of noise, and one prison guard asks another, "Hey, did you hear that?" The brunette quickly goes squeak, and the second prison guard says, "Oh, it is only a mouse, don't worry about it." As the redhead climbs over the top of the wall, she also makes a little bit of noise, and the prison guard says to another, "There is noise on the fence again, we should check it out." The redhead quickly goes meow, and the second prison guard says, "Oh, a cat is chasing that mouse over the wall, don't worry about it." As the blonde climbs over the top of the wall, she also makes a little bit of noise. The prison guard tells another, "There is that noise again." The blonde, thinking quickly, goes, "Moo." An older, white-haired man walked into a jewelry store one Friday evening with a beautiful young gal at his side. He told the jeweler he was looking for a special ring for his girlfriend. The jeweler looked through his stock and brought out a $5,000 ring and showed it to him. The old man said, "I don't think you understand. I want something very special." At that statement, the jeweler went to his special stock and brought another ring over. "Here's a stunning ring at only $40,000, the jeweler said. The young lady's eyes sparkled and her whole body trembled with excitement. The old man, seeing this, said, "We'll take it." The jeweler asked how payment would be made, and the old man stated by check. "I know you need to make sure my check is good, so I'll write it now, and you can call the bank Monday to verify the funds, and I'll pick the ring up Monday afternoon," he said. Monday morning, a very teed-off jeweler phoned the old man. "There's no money in that account." "I know," said the old man, "but can you imagine the weekend I had?" 3 lawyers and 3 engineers are traveling by train to a conference. The 3 lawyers buy a ticket each, while the engineers buy only one. The lawyers laugh at the engineers, crying, "How can 3 people travel by train using only one ticket?" The engineers respond with, "You'll see." They all board the train, and the lawyers take a seat while the engineers cram into the bathroom. The train departs, and soon after the conductor comes around collecting everyone's tickets. He gets to the bathroom and knocks on the door. "Tickets, please." The door opens just a bit and a hand shoots out with the ticket. The conductor takes it and moves on to the next person. The lawyers think this is ingenious and decide to try it for themselves on the way back from the conference. However, on the return home, while the lawyers were buying their single ticket, he noticed the engineers weren't buying any. They asked, "How are 3 of you going to travel without a ticket?" The engineers respond with, "You'll see." The lawyers cram into the bathroom and the engineers cram into one nearby. Shortly after the train leaves the station, one of the engineers comes out of their bathroom and goes over to the lawyers' one. They knock on the door. "Tickets, plus." A Chinese doctor can't find a job in a hospital in America, so he opens a clinic and puts a sign outside that reads, "Get treatment for $20. If not cured, get back $100. An American lawyer thinks this is a great opportunity to earn $100 and goes to the clinic. Lawyer, "I have lost my sense of taste." Chinese, "Nurse, bring medicine from box number 14 and put 3 drops in the patient's mouth." Lawyer, this is kerosene." Chinese, "Congrats, your sense of taste is restored. Give me my $20. The annoyed lawyer goes back after a few days to try to recover his money. Lawyer, "I've lost my memory. I can't remember anything." Chinese, "Nurse, bring medicine from box number 14 and put 3 drops in his mouth." Lawyer, annoyed, "This is kerosene. You gave this to me last time for restoring my taste." Chinese, "Congrats, you got your memory back. Give me $20. The fuming lawyer pays him and then comes back a week later determined to get back $100. Lawyer, "My eyesight has become very weak. I cannot see at all." Chinese, "Well, I don't have any medicine for that, so take this $100. Lawyer, staring at the note, "But this is $20, not $100. Chinese, "Congrats, your eyesight is restored. Give me $20. Now wait." A rich businessman is dying, and his friend comes for a last visit. "Fred," whispers the businessman, "I have to tell you something." "What is it, John? You can tell me everything," says Fred. "You know that trade we were making with the Italians, the package we were delivering? Fred, I didn't deliver it. I kept it for myself. I kept $500 for myself, Fred." "I can forgive you, John. We were friends for a long time. $500 don't matter. But Fred, there's something else. The job we were doing for the Spanish, giving them back those $5,000, you know. I kept those too. John, we're both millionaires. I don't care about those $5,000. Don't worry about that." "Well," whispers John, almost unhearable, "there's one more thing. The huge job for the Brits. The biggest deal in the history of our business, Fred. I kept that money too. It was $1 billion. $1 billion, Fred. That's just unforgivable." "Don't worry, John. I know about that. That's why I poisoned you." A businessman was interviewing applicants for the position of manager of a large division. He quickly devised a test for choosing the most suitable candidate. He simply asked each applicant this question: "What is 2 plus 2? The first interviewee was a journalist. His answer was 22. The second was a social worker. She said, "I don't know the answer, but I'm very glad that we had the opportunity to discuss it." The third applicant was an engineer. He pulled out a slide rule and came up with an answer, somewhere between 3.999 and 4.001. Next came an attorney. He stated that, in the case of Jenkins versus the Department of the Treasury, 2 plus 2 was proven to be 4. Finally, the businessman interviewed an accountant. When he asked him what 2 plus 2 was, the accountant got up from his chair, went over to the door, closed it, came back, and sat down. Leaning across the desk, he said in a low voice, "How much do you want it to be?" Police were investigating the mysterious death of a prominent businessman who had jumped from a window of his 9th-story office. Nancy, his voluptuous private secretary, could offer no explanation for the action, but said that her boss had been acting peculiarly ever since she started working for him a month ago. "After my very first week on the job," Nancy said, "I received a raise. At the end of the second week, he called me into his private office, gave me a lovely black nightgown and 5 pairs of nylon stockings, and said, 'These are for a beautiful, efficient secretary.' At the end of the third week, he gave me a fabulous mink stole. Then this afternoon, he called me into his private office again, presented me with this fabulous diamond bracelet, and asked me if I could consider making love to him. I told him that I would, and because he had been so nice to me, he could have it for just $500, although I was charging all the other guys in the office $1,000. That's when he jumped out the window. Hey." As a trucker stops at a red light, a blonde catches up. She jumps out of her car, runs up to his truck, and knocks on the door. The trucker lowers the window, and she says, "Hi, my name is Heather, and you're losing some of your load." The trucker ignores her and proceeds down the street. When the truck stops for another red light, the girl catches up again. She jumps out of her car, runs up, and knocks on the door. Again, the trucker lowers the window. As if they've never spoken, the blonde says brightly, "Hi, my name is Heather, and you are losing some of your load." Shaking his head, the trucker ignores her again and continues down the street. At the third red light, the same thing happens again. All out of breath, the blonde gets out of her car, runs up, and knocks on the truck door. The trucker lowers the window. Again she says, "Hi, my name is Heather, and you are losing some of your load." When the light turns green, the trucker revs up and races to the next light. When he stops this time, he hurriedly gets out of the truck and runs back to the blonde's car. He knocks on her window, and as she lowers it, he says, "Hi, my name is Kevin. It's winter in Michigan, and I'm driving the salt truck." I was observing a woman in the grocery store with a 3-year-old girl in her basket. As they passed the cookie section, the little girl asked for cookies, and her mother told her, "No." The little girl immediately began to whine and fuss, and the mother said quietly, "Now, Julie, we just have half of the aisles left to go through. Don't be upset. It won't be long now." Soon they came to the candy aisle, and the little girl began to shout for candy. When told she couldn't have any, she began to cry. The mother said, There, Julie, don't cry. Only 2 more aisles to go, and then we'll be checking out." When they got to the checkout stand, the little girl immediately began to clamor for gum and burst into a terrible tantrum upon discovering there'd be no gum purchased. The mother said serenely, "Julie, we'll be through this checkout stand in 5 minutes, and then you can go home and have a nice nap." I followed them out to the parking lot and stopped the woman to compliment her. "I couldn't help noticing how patient you were with little Julie," I began. The mother replied, "I'm Julie. My little girl's name is Tammy." One afternoon, a man was strolling through town when he bumped into an old high school friend, someone he hadn't seen in years. Back in school, this friend had been notorious for bragging, constantly boasting about his wealth, achievements, and relationships. The man wondered if time had changed him. It hadn't. Within minutes, the old friend was rambling on, just as he always had. "I've got the most amazing job. You wouldn't believe the salary. My house, a mansion. You should see the view. And oh, I just bought myself a brand new Porsche. Top of the line, of course." The man nodded politely, barely getting a word in as the bragging continued. Then the friend pulled out his wallet and flashed a photo. "Here, take a look at my wife. Isn't she gorgeous?" The man sighed, exasperated. Then, without missing a beat, he smirked and said, "If you think she's gorgeous, you should see my girlfriend." The old friend's eyes lit up. "Oh, is she a real stunner, too?" "No," the man replied with a grin. "She's an optometrist." When Harold and Betty moved to Texas, Harold was determined to embrace his inner cowboy. So when he found a flashy pair of cowboy boots on sale, he bought them faster than you could say "yeehaw," strutting into the kitchen in his new kicks, chest out, and ego bigger than a Texas steak. He asked, "Notice anything different, darling?" Betty glanced over her teacup. "New attitude?" Not satisfied, Harold disappeared into the bathroom, ditched everything but the boots, and reappeared buck naked, hands on hips like a rodeo champion. "How about now?" he asked, grinning. Betty looked him up and down, took a sip of tea, and said, "Whatever was sagging yesterday is still sagging today." Annoyed, Harold snapped, "It's sagging because it's admiring my boots." Without missing a beat, Betty replied, "Next time, Harold, buy a hat." Sally, a blonde, goes on her first camping trip. Her husband, who was a scout leader, was sick, so she volunteered to take over for him for the weekend. She got everyone together and assigned different duties to each scout. Gabby was responsible for the food supplies, Mike would be the cook this trip, Johnny was responsible for their maps and making up a time schedule, Tim was to decide on their events and fit them into Johnny's schedule, and Sally would test all their equipment before setting out. They arrived at Big Moose Mountain and everyone was excited. They arrived right on schedule and were getting ready for their first event, hiking up the mountain. But first, they wanted to get something to eat. So Sally asked Mike if he would prepare the meal, and, of course, Mike said he would. About 10 minutes later, he came back and told Sally, "I can't make the supper. I can't light a fire with the matches you brought." Sally replied, "I can't understand that. Those matches should be perfectly fine. I tested them all just before we left." They weren't in my pockets. Suddenly, I realized I had to leave them in the car. Frantically, I headed for the parking lot. My husband has scolded me many times for leaving my keys in the car's ignition. He's afraid that the car could be stolen. As I looked around the parking lot, I realized he was right. The parking lot was empty. I immediately called the police. I gave them my location and confessed that I had left my keys in the car and that it had been stolen. Then I made the most difficult call of all to my husband. "I left my keys in the car and it's been stolen." There was a moment of silence. I thought the call had been disconnected, but then I heard his voice. "Are you kidding me?" he barked. "I dropped you off." Now it was my turn to be silent. Embarrassed, I said, "Well, come and get me." He retorted, "Just as soon as I convince this cop that I didn't steal your damn car." Two priests step into the communal shower only to realize there's no soap. One says, "I'll go grab 2 bars from my room." He runs naked to his room, grabs the soap, and runs back. But as he's on his way, 3 nuns arrive. Panicking, he freezes in place, trying to act like a statue. The nuns look at him and exclaim, "What a beautifully sculpted figure, so perfectly shaped." One of them, curious, decides to give it a little tug. The priest winces in pain, but holds his pose. The nuns are now convinced it's not a statue, but a soap dispenser. The second nun, seeing the first one's reaction, pulls it again, and the priest drops one of the bars of soap. He still doesn't move. Finally, the third nun, a little more persistent, pulls it once, then twice, then 3 times. She pulls it again and again, but nothing happens. Frustrated, she keeps tugging and then, with a triumphant smile, says, "Well, praise the Lord. It also dispenses shower gel." The 4 newlyweds spent their honeymoon at Niagara Falls. They occupied adjoining rooms, sat at the same table, and were inseparable. One evening after dinner, as they were returning to their rooms, there was lightning and the lights went off. It was pitch dark, and groping their way, they made it to their rooms and quietly undressed. Jack, a religious fellow, knelt to pray. Just as he completed his prayer, the lights came on, and he saw that he was with his friend's wife. He jumped up and dashed for the door. "Too late to hurry now," said the girl. "Joe never prays." Jack and Joe are in prison, in separate cells, some distance away from each other. Sad little jail cells, really, with only a solitary, tiny window to peek into the outside, so they pass the time as best they can by telling each other jokes. One day, Jack asks, "Got any new jokes, Joe?" "Sorry," Joe says. "I told you every joke I know months ago. You got any more new jokes?" Jack thinks for a moment and says, "Well, I do have one more joke, but it's one of those jokes you have to write down. It's not funny when you say it out loud. Gotta draw a picture and stuff." Joe suggests, "Why don't you write it on a piece of paper and throw it over here?" Jack agrees and spends all week collecting the perfect materials, rewriting the perfect joke, drawing the perfect accommodating picture, and shaping that joke into a perfectly aerodynamic and balanced paper plane. On Friday evening, when the lights go out and the guards are changing shifts, Jack tells Joe, "Okay, here comes the joke." He tosses the paper plane. It sails across the prison hallway, slips between the prison cell bars, and glides directly towards Joe's awaiting hands. Just as Joe is about to grab the paper plane, it gets caught in an updraft. It bounces against the ceiling once and then glides out the tiny cell window. "Did you get the joke?" Jack asks. "No, sorry," Joe responds. "It went right over my head." A priest and a lawyer had both died. After what seemed like an eternity, they finally stood before the pearly gates of heaven. Suddenly the gates open and a bright angel of God appears before them. "Welcome to the kingdom of heaven. Please get in my carriage and I will show you to your new homes," says the angel. The priest and the lawyer oblige and climb aboard. As they travel, they see roads of gold and jewels, houses large and small. Finally, they approach the first house. It is large and beautiful, crowned with jewels, a pool, and beautiful women. The priest thinks, "Wow, this is beautiful. Surely all my years serving God are finally being rewarded." The angel departs the carriage and says, "Okay, lawyer, this is yours." The lawyer is ecstatic, jumps out of the carriage, and runs in joy to his new home. This priest thinks, "Wow, if this is what he gets, then I am surely graced." They pull away, and as they travel, the priest notices things aren't so nice. The roads barely look paved, the houses are run down, and the sky becomes cloudy and dull. They pull up to a shack, and the angel gets out and says, "This is yours." The priest looks confused and asks the angel, "But how could this be? I have served God all my life. I've never experienced the touch of a woman or the taste of alcohol. Why would I get this shack, but the lawyer gets that?" The angel giggles a little and says, "We have many priests in heaven, but that is the first lawyer to ever make it here." A businessman is spending Christmas in a hotel for a meeting. As it happens, the city he's visiting is host to the world's largest chess tournament, and most of the competitors are staying in the same hotel. The businessman doesn't really interact with the chess players during his stay, since his meeting is on another floor. But one morning, he comes down to the main level for breakfast and finds all the players sitting in the lobby. He sits and chats with them for a while, but quickly loses interest. All they can seem to talk about is how they beat their opponents in the tournament. Cunning checkmates, superior positioning, board control, and the like. Suddenly, the hotel manager bursts out from behind the reception desk and screams for the chess players to get out at the top of his lungs. He says they can go anywhere, just not the lobby. As they reluctantly get up to leave, the businessman confronts the manager on his outburst. "Why did you make them leave if they're just going to move somewhere else in the hotel?" he asks. "Well," the manager responds, "I just can't stand chestnuts boasting in an open foyer." A young man becomes a successful businessman very early on in life. Being a faithful member of the church, he has always paid his tithe for years and years. He later falls upon hard times, and so he talks to his banker. His banker lets him know that things are worse than the man had realized. He couldn't even afford the church's tithe. Upon these hard times, he fell away from the church. For years, he accumulated debt trying to keep up appearances and become successful again. One day, the pastor of the man's old church approaches him and asks why he hasn't been coming to church and paying his tithe. The man confides in his old pastor and confesses that he's come by a bit of bad luck and so fell away from the church. The pastor says, "Of course you've fallen onto tough times. You've fallen away from the church. Start coming back to the church and paying your tithe and you'll be back in God's good graces in no time." Do you really think that will help? I'm in pretty deep here. Well, I suppose if you really want to, you could pay the tithe for the time you were gone from the church. The full 10% of everything you accumulated should belong to the church. So the man and the pastor meet with the man's banker and calculate everything he's accumulated over his years out of the church, and they both sign. The pastor opens the envelope and exclaims, "Wow, $60,000! It's more than the church could have hoped for." The banker says, "Yes, up until now, us too. Now how will you be paying?" A young guy from Idaho moves to Florida and goes to a big everything-under-one-roof department store looking for a job. The manager says, "Do you have any sales experience?" The kid says, "Yeah, I was a vacuum salesman back in Idaho." Well, the boss was unsure, but he liked the kid and figured he'd give him a shot, so he gave him the job. "You start tomorrow. I'll come down after we close and see how you did." His first day on the job was rough, but he got through it. After the store was locked up, the boss came down to the sales floor. "How many customers bought something from you today?" The kid frowns and looks at the floor and mutters, "One." The boss says, "Just one? Our salespeople average sales to 20 to 30 customers a day. That will have to change, and soon, if you'd like to continue your employment here. We have very strict standards for our sales force here in Florida. One sale a day might have been acceptable in Idaho, but you're not on the farm anymore, son." The kid took his beating but continued to look at his shoes, so the boss felt kind of bad for chewing him out on his first day. He asked, semi-sarcastically, "So, how much was your one sale for?" The kid looks up at his boss and says, $101,237.65. The boss, astonished, says, $101,237.65. "What the heck did you sell?" The kid says, "Well, first, I sold him some new fish hooks. Then I sold him a new fishing rod to go with his new hooks. Then I asked him where he was going fishing, and he said down the coast. So I told him he was going to need a boat. So we went down to the boat department, and I sold him a twin-engine Chris Craft. Then he said he didn't think his Honda Civic would pull it. So I took him down to the automotive department and sold him that 4X4 Expedition." The boss said, "A guy came in here to buy a fish hook, and you sold him a boat and a truck." The kid said, "No, the guy came in here to buy tampons for his wife." And I said, "Dude, your weekend's shot. You might as well go fishing." It was early December, and a posh hotel was hosting a large chess convention. The entire ballroom had been rented out, and the first day had gone smoothly. The quarter, semi, and ultimate final rounds were all that remained. As the convention broke for a break, the attendees filed out into the hotel foyer, allowing the staff to clear away the chess tables and set up for the evening's banquet. The round of 16 had been particularly thrilling, with many dramatic endgames, and the energy among the players was electric. The 8 quarter-finalists boasted loudly about their victories, and soon the previously quiet ballroom turned into a buzzing hub of excitement, much to the dismay of the other hotel guests. Complaints trickled in until the hotel manager finally emerged, asking to speak with the president of the convention. "Hello there. What seems to be the problem?" the president asked. "I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to quiet down," the manager replied. "You're disturbing the other guests. You and your attendees need to either quiet down or leave until the banquet is ready." "Why?" the president asked, perplexed. "Because," the manager said, "I can't stand having chestnuts boasting in a foyer." A farmer had an idea to make some extra money during the off-season. He owned a large property with a big white fence that stretched end to end and along an old country road that saw few cars. He decided to set up a Christmas light display. It took a while to gather all the lights, but after a lot of hard work and countless extension cords, he was ready. When the sun set, the first car that drove down the road saw a sight like no other. The entire fence was covered in dazzling lights, fence posts, crossbeams, all of it glowing with a mesmerizing display. The driver was so impressed he called his friends and family, and within hours the traffic was backed up for miles. At the end of the display, the farmer had his farmhands waiting with donation buckets, and they brought in hundreds of dollars that night. The display continued for weeks, getting more and more popular. Even with the high electricity bills, the farmer turned a tidy profit. As the years went on, the light displays became more elaborate, synchronized to music, twinkling in time with passing cars, featuring LEDs, lasers, inflatable reindeer, and glowing manger scenes. But over time, the farmer noticed fewer and fewer cars showing up. Where there once were lines of visitors, now there were just a handful each night. By the end of the season, attendance was down to a tenth of what it used to be. As November rolled around again, the farmer went to the feed store and overheard two locals talking. "Yeah, it used to be amazing, but now, it just ain't the same. I don't know, it's just not fresh anymore." "I know. Everyone's got Christmas lights now. He needs to do something new, something original." The farmer was furious. He'd spent hundreds of hours creating these intricate displays, and now people were treating them like stale hay. "Fine," he muttered to himself, "I'll show them." He rushed back to his farm, tore down every light, ripped out the inflatable Santa, and knocked over the manger scene. Then, he painstakingly strung the exact same red and green lights on every square foot of his fence. On the first night of his new display, the visitors were shocked. Their phones lit up as they told their friends and neighbors. Soon, the line of cars stretched for miles, longer than it had ever been during the glory days of his displays. The farmer stood there, shaking his head, while his farmhands looked on in disbelief at the sea of cars. "I don't believe it," the lead farmhand exclaimed. "How could this be so popular?" The farmer smiled wryly. "It's simple. Everybody says they want something new, but what really gets them going is the same old thing over and over again." An elderly golfer was playing near a water hazard when, mid-swing, his club slipped from his hands and splashed into the water. Distraught, he cried out, "Oh no, that was my best club. I need it to win the tournament and maybe stretch my pension a bit." Suddenly, the Lord appeared and asked, "Why are you crying, my son?" The golfer explained his predicament. The Lord nodded, then reached into the water and emerged with a golden golf club. "Is this your club?" The golfer shook his head. "No, Lord." The Lord dipped into the water again and came up with a silver club. "Is this your club?" Again, the golfer replied, "No." Finally, the Lord went down and brought up a humble iron club. "Is this your club?" the Lord asked. With a smile, the golfer said, "Yes, that's the one." Pleased with the man's honesty, the Lord gave him all 3 clubs, and the golfer went home overjoyed. A few weeks later, the same golfer was walking with his wife near the same water hazard when splash, she slipped and fell into the water. He cried out, "Lord, help me! My wife has fallen in!" Once again, the Lord appeared and went down into the water. He came up holding Kate Upton. "Is this your wife?" the Lord asked. The old man replied, "Yes." The Lord scowled. "You lied! That's not your wife!" "Forgive me, Lord," said the golfer. "It's a misunderstanding. If I had said no to Kate Upton, you'd have brought up Jennifer Aniston. Then if I said no to her, you'd finally bring up my wife. And if I said yes, then you'd give me all 3. He paused, then added, "And Lord, I'm an old man, I can't handle 3 women. So I figured I'd better just take the first one. And the Lord was pleased.